Hey folks, it's Rob and welcome back. This is actually going to be a re-recording because the first time I recorded this we had no audio. So yeah, well done me. Doing great. But we're here with the Dungeon Master's Rulebook. We're gonna I may sometimes out of just sheer inertia call this sometimes the Dungeon Master's Guide. That is not this book. That is Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. This is the Dungeon Master's Rulebook for the red box set. That is the 1983 Dungeons and Dragons TSR box set, as we can, right? Um, we're going through the Dungeon Master's Rulebook. We just finished on like abbreviations and reactions, and we're getting into running the game, and we've been through order of events and order in like an encounter and a game turn in combat. And next up, we're going to get into your first game, and I am going to be skipping the majority of this material from the actual first Dungeon Master's guide, first Dungeon Master's adventure in here, which is your tutorial game to run. Because honestly, I'm not gonna. While as much as I want players to become dungeon masters, I want people to enjoy playing this too. And there is such a thing as knowing too much about what's going on. And if you have not played, I want you to play this. And if you're not run this, I want you to run this. And um, so I'm going to skip over a lot of this. We're going to read this bit here, right? Um, Maybe talk a little about like encounters and monsters in relation to this. Like we have the carry-on crawler here. And we'll also read ending an adventure, which I've put a little flag on here, just so, the easily removable post-it flag. Um, so I can easily skip forward here, and at which point uh, I'll probably just drop there, and the next part will be procedures and rules, which will be important. Um, so let's get started. As I Again, I'm genuinely sorry that the audio didn't record the first time. I feel while I may be a little more refined in some ways this time, it also will be that I have a lot less off the cuff to say, probably, because the genuine reminiscence I have the first time around, I can't even review and go back and listen to go and do it again. But let's get started. Your first game. The following adventure is designed for use by a beginning dungeon master. It will tell you what to say to the players, when and what to roll, and indicate page references for additional information. Before you start, you should look through the rest of this booklet to see what information is given. One section called Procedures and Rules, that's up next, pages 14 to 21, gives details on handling most situations. Retainers should not be needed if there are 4 or more players, but you should use them. But should you use them, be sure they are properly handled, page 20. The order of events checklist will be helpful during the game. Now, I will say, don't run this game on 2 players. This will chew them up, and it'll be an unfun experience. Or you're going to need to add a lot of NPC retainers or just fellow NPC player characters, and it's going to be a lot of you rolling against yourself and the players not being all that involved at that point. So try to have at least 4, preferably more. Some of the combat encounters are geared towards large old school parties. You may need to make adjustments if you're going to otherwise do things on fewer characters as a dungeon master. And if this is your first time DMing, that's an interesting step up in difficulty for you. So maybe we'll get into some of that in a bit. But let's carry on. Before you start, well, no, we read that. Monsters and treasures are explained afterwards in separate sections. All the details on the monsters and treasures found in this adventure are fully explained here, and you will not need to refer to those sections. Before you start the game, make sure all the pregame details have been handled, including the pregame checklist. Well, using the pregame checklist, which we have right here. 1. Do all the players know how to play? And by that they mean, have they played the solo adventure in the player's manual? Which I would recommend that anyone you're going to try to do this endeavor for should do that solo adventure. It's not that hard. You can get PDF copies of this game nowadays off of drivethrough.rpg.net. I don't have an affiliate link, but I might think to put one in the description someday. Not that I'm an affiliate, but just so you have a ready link to it. And that PDF is perfectly fine for getting started, right? You don't need to have one of these. It's not like these are all that hard to get a hold of, but you don't want to spend. Even without the dice and without extra stuff, this was just 2 books and the box. And the box is in not terrible shape, but not the best shape. It is definitely kind of concave here, right? And it has what's left over of this sticker on here, and it's certainly a bit worn around the corners. This is easily $100 on Noble Knight Games. You might get lucky in the charity shop, like I did, but don't count on it. Right. 2. Have you read this book up to this point? Well, we have, right? Have you looked through the rest of this booklet, which you should do before you run this game? But we're going to continue reading onwards, later. 3. Do you and the players know the who, why, what, where, when of the adventure? Now, I think this is highly relevant, and I learned this in school as like who, what, when, where, and why, right? But maybe this is a different priority in some ways, but basically these are the fundamentals of a lot of writing, right? You want to answer these questions: who's doing, or who is being done to, or whatever. Why is it happening? Why are you doing this? What are you doing, right? Where are you doing it? And when? Probably now, right? But all these questions have a lot to do with motivation and understanding direction, where you're going to go, right? And if if you're here because like you're here to get Bargle, right, which kind of is what this is about, you're following up on the Bargle adventure that we had, in the solo adventure. Maybe it's because Alina was killed by Bargle, and you're here to catch. You understand he's here somewhere in this ruined dungeon complex, and you're here to get revenge or bring him to justice or whatever it is you plan on doing. 4. Are all the characters ready to go, including equipment? So the DM may hand out pre-gen characters. Those are found in the player's manual. In the player's rulebook over here. It's called player's manual. Yeah. In here in the middle. One more. Yeah, here we go. Spells. Yeah, sample characters. Right? Yeah, nice 6 sample characters, one of basically each character class, ready to roll right here. And alternately, you can generate your own characters. And that's involved in the game, and preferably done well before we're actually trying to run the adventure. But also like the equipment, right? You don't want to spend the first hour of your game session where basically the players are having to do a virtual shopping session as they get the necessary equipment to go ahead to go beyond the adventure. Surely this can be handled basically what we would nowadays call offline, right? In your own time before you even show up for the game. Um, just like pick out equipment from the money that you have. Um, some games will be less specific about equipment and than others, and again, it's also a matter of encumbrance. But try to have a feel of what you're planning on doing with the characters and what's going on. And if you're handing out the characters, make sure they're equipped, right? Um, so, number 5, have the players chosen a caller and a mapper? Do they have a piece of paper, a piece of graph paper, and a pencil to map with? Now, I think that caller and mapper, we've talked about this before in the player's manual, are not necessarily archaic, but the caller is more useful in larger groups, and I think mappers are never stop being useful. You might have a DM who gives you handouts and goes, "Hey, there's a map," right? How do you know that's the entire map? Shouldn't you be updating the map even if it is the entire map? Maybe there's notes you want to make or things that you want to remember that might be in relation to where something is in this dungeon, right? Or in this place. But also, just like, how do you know there's no secret doors? How do you know the dungeon master has not given you a partial truth? Maybe you found a map that's just wrong and he's handed it to you as a handout. The mapper's job is important, and some people are going to be better suited to that than others. Work it out amongst yourselves who's going to actually be taking care of mapping, or if nobody's going to be taking care of mapping, in which case you're just going to be at the whim of the DM in that case. But it's not necessarily a bad choice, but it's a choice. So, as it says here, if any answer is no, stop and fix the problem, right? So make sure you're ready by being ready, right? In this adventure, you will find many sections to be read to the players. Listen to them while you are reading. They contain information for you too. So that's these dark sections here, right? This is all scripting for the DM. It can be stated statements by NPCs. It can also just be description by the dungeon master for the characters, right? For the players. There. This is very useful for your first adventure because basically, and especially back in this day when this was published, you didn't have any examples of play to work off of. What is the dungeon master supposed to be doing and saying to people, right? To the players. And like what few media representations we had in the 80s were like that Tom Hanks movie where he wants to jump off the World Trade Center. Um, it's not the best representation when we did get represented. Really, um, and the Dungeons and Dragons game is not going to tell you how to do this. The cartoon show, right? Um, so what this is basically your first training wheels, right? And it's going to give you scripting and a style of description. And of course, you can make your own style of description and how you're going to explain to the players what's going on. And you can even, this is all theater of the mind. This is not playing with miniatures right now. You might be playing with miniatures. You might get out a sketch map, a vinyl sheet with the grid on it, and you might start sketching the stuff out on the map as it happens, right? Lots of different ways of answering these problems of like how do I describe the environment to the players, but this is one way, and it's better to have at least one way than no ways, right? So now, whenever you find a paragraph that starts with DM, it contains information for you only. Stop for a minute and read it, The DM information contains instructions on how to run the coming encounter or how to handle a new situation. So you can see here, DM, stop a moment and make sure that all the characters are ready to go, then continue reading, right? Some of them are more informative than others, but this is like the first page, right? Entry 1 is over here on the next page. Adventure record sheet. Using a blank piece of scrap paper, it doesn't have to be scrap paper, but a blank piece of paper, make a list of the details you will need during the adventure. Near the top of the page, write the name of each character, making a list. To the right of each name, write the class of the character, and to the right of the class, write the armor class of the character. Now, this is a very handy thing for you to have as the DM, because you want to know, A, who's playing what, B, what their armor class is in case you need to roll against it, right? You need to know whether that attack hits or not and what their expected AC is. That's worthwhile information right there. Ask the caller for the party's marching order. The characters would normally travel single file or in pairs. Another popular choice from basically from you see it a lot in video games actually, is kind of like the flower pattern of like got a guy in the middle and you got like some guys in the front and some guys in the back, right? And you can expand into this if you need, you can right? If the hallway is wide enough, of course. I wouldn't allow this to be the case in a 10-foot wide corridor, 3 abreast. You're too tight. You're not going to be able to act properly in a combat situation. But, you could even, do this kind of thing, right? Up to you and the player. Eventually, obviously, this gets more and more. Now, if you're like on the surface and like this is your magic user, right? And like you got a fighter and a dwarf up here, and maybe you got like the elf over here. So he's like, behind the dwarf, so you can kind of shoot over him. And you got your cleric kind of guarding on the back over here, maybe, right? Or a halfling. Or maybe you got your halfling up here and just fighter back here. But if you're in the open air, you can like have as many abreast as you want, really. Enough about that. So, write the order and character list. Make a note which end is the front to avoid confusion. Very straightforward. Rest of the sheet may be used for keeping track of time, details of monsters encountered, treasure found, and any other notes you may wish to make. When you're ready to turn the page and start reading, following the instructions given. Now, this is obviously on the same page, right? It's right here. They have not adjusted that to reflect the actual edited formatting. Maybe they thought there was going to be a piece of art right here. I don't know. But there's a variety of ways of handling this kind of documentation as a dungeon master. One of the things I like to do is I like to use post-it notes. So, and on the post-it notes, I put them into my campaign journal. And while I'll have noted in the campaign journal what the encounter is supposed to be with, like, say, for example, Goblin, right? AC 7, right? And I'll probably put myself some brief notes on here of like their attack value and that kind of thing, if there's anything supposed to be unusual, or for like, just in general, right? Attack 1d6, and I might break it down further with more notes for myself. But basically, I take that note and I take it out of my campaign journal on the page it's open to, and I stick it down behind my screen. And let's say this is like 3 goblins. I'll tick them off, right? I will go, goblin, 1, 2, and 3. And let's, quickly determine their hit dice if I haven't done so already. So, like, goblins are, like, basically, um, um, it'd be better if I was better prepared about this. Are there any goblins in this? There are definitely kobolds. Let's not be all spoilery, though. Let's just go to the monster section. M L Kobold K. Come on. Too far. That's C for cat. D for dragon. Dwarf. There we are. Goblin. Yeah. Hit dice 1 minus 1. Right. So if I roll 2, that's 1 hit point. If I roll 1, still 1 hit point. Can't be less than 1 hit point. If I roll a 7, that's 6 hit points. Right. So I got a hit point with 1, another goblin with 1, and a goblin with 6 hit points is probably the one who's in charge of this little group. And if there's any treasure, maybe I have it on here, but I will strike off the goblins that are killed, or maybe keep track damage on here, right? And that's just for my own immediate note keeping, especially if there's a lot of things involved in the combat. I might need to have multiple post-its with different information on them. But this is just something I do. You certainly don't need to do that. But I find it handy to just like have these in and out of my campaign journal by just like kind of putting them in there, right? Just stick it in there and take them out as I need. And they also keep track of what's been encountered functionally and what monsters have been killed. And I might make notes as to who killed what so that I can, keep track of awarding XP, which is something we'll get to. But we're going to skip over the actual adventure itself. But I will point out that this is what a carry-on crawler looks like, just for the record. Which is a very early encounter in this adventure. And the reason I'm talking about it is because, like, this is one of the things I mean about, like, have enough players along. Here's the carry-on crawler stat box, right? And it's a 75 XP monster, that's nice, because awarding XP is a thing about killing monsters, doing things, and, well, in my opinion, about doing things. We'll get to where that says in the rules written very shortly, but, and treasure. But this is a 3-hit die plus 1 monster. So 3-hit die, I roll this die 3 times. 1, 2, all together. I rolled a total of 4. The plus 1, so plus 1 on each die is another 3. It's going to see a 7 hit point carry-on crawler. That was an incredibly low roll. This could be a 27 hit point carry-on crawler. Not very likely, admittedly. But more likely is something more in the middle, right? More like a 15 hit point carry-on crawler. Now, if you're only rolling a d6 damage in general, that's going to be more in a moment of killing. And that's not the biggest problem, however. The biggest problem is that one carrion crawler gets 8 attacks. And they cause paralysis. They don't do any real damage. A carrion crawler will, once it's knocked out the party, then eat the party. It won't start eating victims until basically it's out of combat. But all you need for a total party wipe is for basically, say, your 4 characters to all be paralyzed and then be eaten by the carrion crawler. So this is less of a problem if you happen to have 6, 7, 8 players. It's a big deal for encountering a carrion crawler if there's only 2, 3, 4 of you. Because it has enough hit points to tank through paralyzing each and every one of you, even if all 8 of these attacks are directed at one character at a time, which they don't necessarily have to be. if you all get down with the carrion crawler, it can have an opportunity to attack all of you. And especially if there's only like two of you, right? Um, but that's enough about that. The only warning I'm going to give you about the encounters in this book is that maybe you need to take some consideration as to how many players that you have when dealing with the encounters. Um, Here we have the actual map of level one. Level one is actually the Castle Misamir up on the surface. It contains information on it, so this is not actually a handout, right? This here is the first dungeon level, which is level 2. And once upon a time in old school, there was some correlation of like level 1 players play on level 1, level 2 players play on level 2. This is a fairly solid dungeon crawl, but meant for more than a few players. And so if there are a few of you, just keep that in mind, that you may need to play fairly conservatively or hire retainers, which I recommend. Ending an adventure. Before any game begins, the DM and players should set a time for the game to end and stick to it. An adventure might end before that time if the characters become severely wounded, use up all their spells, or are fully loaded with treasure, etc. And, if you've got everything you can carry, yeah, good time to head back to town, right? You've already filled your boots. What are you going to continue on about for right now? Unless you don't have a choice. Um, they may be allowed to go home, rest a day or two, and return if time permits further adventuring, right? So you're in the middle of your session. They've already managed to fill their purses with every single copper piece you threw at them. They're wanting to go back to town after day one and go and drop off their loot, basically, and get a night's rest and come back again. Maybe that's allowable, especially up here on level 1, where basically this is a ruined castle up on the surface, depending on how they've handled their encounters, right? Um, and certainly between play sessions, if you're still in the same adventure, maybe it's allowable to have set up camp, or maybe you just pick up exactly where you left off. Depends on where you are and what's going on, right? But at the same time, what they're saying here is basically play until you're set a time to finish playing. Everyone has other things in their life to do other than playing this game. They can't just stay for 6 hours when they were supposed to be playing this for 3. Try to be respectful of each other's time, and some people will have more interest in this than others. I can swear to you, I have certainly met plenty of people who were like, this is the best thing ever, and I don't want to stop playing. And those people are great. Fantastic. But at the same time, and maybe those are people who are suited to be DMs, but you need to stop playing at a certain point because basically everyone else is potentially having some other responsibilities that they need to do. This is not a game for 4-year-olds. You will be of at least an age where you have school, if nothing else. Schoolwork that you may need to pay attention to, family, household chores. You'll need to sleep, right? And that's let aside anything that an adult might need to be doing. So, at the end of an adventure, you announce the total treasure found and kept by the party so the players can divide it. The method of division should have been decided before the adventure began. Some methods are described in the player's manual on page 55. While the players are dividing treasure, you may spend the time calculating the experience points earned during the adventure. An electronic pocket calculator is helpful as an example of the time this was written. I might still have an electronic pocket calculator somewhere, but I don't know if it has a working battery. It's maybe in a desk drawer somewhere. But I haven't really properly used a pocket calculator since I stopped working at the bank. Nowadays, everyone has one of these. And, that has a calculator function built into it if it comes to it. But honestly, sometimes it's just pen and paper for me. Just totting it up, right? It's simple addition. It shouldn't take me too long to do, but I'm 50. I learned how to do quick math in my head. So you should have records of all the creatures defeated by the party on an adventure record sheet. If not, take a few minutes to remember the creatures encountered. If necessary, ask the players to remind you and remember to keep a record next time. Yeah, so don't be that person who's caught out that. You might ask who killed what. That'd be fair. But um, yeah, keep the records yourself of what's actually encountered and defeated. Uh, I think it's going to get into this, so I'm not going to go into this next diversion I just thought of, but because I think it's about to come up, and if it doesn't come up, I will say. Um, in each monster description, an XP value is given. This is the number of experience points to be awarded for each monster of that type. Multiply the XP value by the number of monsters defeated to find the total XP award for that encounter. Note that a captured monster is counted as conquered for XP awards even if released. So, yeah, this is exactly the point I was going to mention, right? This does not occur often. The monster must usually surrender as the result of a morale check, or be magically caught by such like a hold person or web spell, for example, for this situation to arise. Monsters that run away are not counted unless they are caught or defeated later. So if you manage to kill half the opposing group of goblins and they decide discretion is the better part of valor and run away, and you let them run off, you're not going to get the XP for that. Now, that may seem a little unfair, but you've only defeated the monsters that you brought down. Um, what is also useful is just simply, those are the resources that you didn't have to expend. Those are the hits you didn't take. Consider how your party would be doing if the combat encounter continued, right? You might give pursuit if they're going to run away, which is great. They might also lead you into something. Be careful. Low level play is honestly some of the hardest play because you have the fewest hit points. You are the easiest to hit. You have the fewest means of causing damage. It is the hardest to hit the monsters. You are going to have to be careful. So sometimes it's okay to let the monsters run away. Keep that in mind. Add all the XP awards for all the encounters to find the total XP for the adventure. Find the number of shares in the party. NPC retainers count as 1/2 share for XP division. Each character counts as a full share. Finally, divide the total XP by the number of shares to find the XP per share and announce that total. A retainer will get 1/2 of the amount you announce. So that may be a little confusing, but basically you're going to tell the players, if there was 10,000 XP and there are 4 players and 1 retainer, I'm going to make it easy on myself, 2 retainers. Each player is going to get 2,000 XP and each retainer is going to get 1,000 XP. And you're not announcing what the retainer XP is. The player's XP is what you're announcing. Okay? What is quickly glossed over there is add all the XP awards for all the encounters to find the total XP. Now, I feel this encompasses things like if there are quest goals, right? If there are, in a little more modern sense of how this game is commonly run, if you manage to save the princess or whatever it is that you set out to do, maybe there's an XP award for completing that. And also, personally, I like to award XP for things such as major prominent moments of player character inspiration, or if they've done something exceptional, they came up with a great plan, they were heroic, or maybe they were immensely entertaining in some way, right? Small XP awards for exceptional behavior is encouraging better play from the players and a better game for everybody. Your mileage may vary, of course. This is not in the rules. This is something I do. You can do what you want. Just saying. So, remind the players to adjust that award for high or low prime requisites. That is the 5 or 10% bonus or the penalties that were described in the player's manual. So if that 2,000 XP awarded was on a character with, say, a fighter with a 17 strength, they get a 10% bonus. They got 2,200 XP. That 10% does add up. So it's nice to have a high prime requisite. Now, they may ask you to help calculate the result, which I guess is also, it was possible then and is possible now, right? Obviously, 5 or 10% gain should be something relatively easily calculated, but get out that pocket calculator. You should also remind them that they get 1 XP for each 1 gold piece of treasure. As treasure is divided by the party without your interference, they must make such calculations themselves. Their bonus or penalty for high or low PR score also applies. So whatever treasure they are awarded that they worked out also is affected by this adjustment for XP purposes. Not the actual treasure, obviously. Gaining levels. If any character gains a level of experience as a result of the XP earned in an adventure, you should watch the roll made for additional hit points. If the character is a magic user or elf, you should privately tell the player that what additional spell is put into their spell book. If a character is a thief, remind the player to change the percentage chances for the special abilities that they have. Player's Manual, page 44. So, you got a fighter, they level up, you roll that hit point with 8-sided die. I got a 3. You also add the Constitution adjustment or deduct the Constitution adjustment, as the case may be. If you have, a nice solid fighter with like a 16 Constitution, that's going to be a +2, so that's 5 hit points. Makes a big difference in that regard. 3 is a bit of a disappointing roll, but the rolls are what they are at this stage, right? There's a 7, and there's a 1, right? They're all just as likely as each other, unfortunately. Now, here's an important rule that some people forget. A character cannot gain more than 1 level of experience in one adventure. Beware if this occurs. It is a sign that you are giving out far too much treasure. It does occur. Some XP should not be counted. The character's XP total stops just short of the amount needed for the 2nd level of experience that would have been gained. So, an example. A beginning 1st level fighter with 0 XP finds a gem worth 10,000 gold pieces during an adventure. Finds the Star of India just sitting there in a dungeon. Maybe he had to bop up Goblin on the head to get it away from Goblin Queen Victoria. Excuse me in my flights of fancy. At the end of the adventure, the fighter has 3,999 XP and no more, just short of the amount needed for 3rd level. Only 1 level of experience is gained. The fighter moves up from the 1st level to 2nd level and rolls 1d8 for additional hit points, modifying the result for a Constitution bonus, if any. The extra 6,001 XP plus any other gain during the adventure are not counted. This is to control progression. I feel that you should not be setting things up in such a way that your players are going to be faced with throwing away lots of XP early on. And maybe that's like there should be an end of the adventure earlier, right? Maybe that should be like this session was too long and we need to like distribute treasure and XP before that point. Maybe it's that you're playing too much of a Monty Hall game, and like here's behind curtain number 3, the Star of India, right? Make the treasure make sense. If your first level thief has an option to pry a ruby out of the eye of an idol that is just up there, why is that possible? First off, why is that ruby just sitting there, right? Secondly, assuming they're able to fence the gem for the gold cash value that they eventually receive and get the XP for, um, it's just for that one character. It's not for multiple characters. It's it could be an adventure of itself to try to find a buyer for a 10,000 gold piece gem, just to use the example, right? Um, Try to balance the adventure in such a way that it makes sense, but also isn't just like too poor or too rich. And this is a matter of balance and knowing how many players you're going to have. And that's why, knowing what your group is going to be and having people show up to be that group consistently is important. This little bit on XP for monsters we're going to do, and then I'm going to wrap the video here because we're going to be moving into the next section, which is procedures and rules, and I'm going to keep that its own distinct, at least one, if not more, 2 videos, because that's, I think, like more than 10 pages. XP for monsters. The experience points for monsters table may be used to calculate the XP awards for monsters created by the DM or for variations of the given monsters. The XP awards in the monster description are calculated using this chart. The special ability bonus is multiplied by the number of asterisks given with the monster's hit dice added to the base XP value. So for like the carry-on crawler, for example, has like an asterisk because it has this power to destroy metal equipment. And it was 3 hit dice, you might recall. But well, it was 3 plus. Yeah, it was 3 plus. So that's base 50 plus 1 special ability is 25, so that's 75 XP, which checks. This is a little advanced for your first games, making up your own monsters, but you can. Maybe you're modifying monsters. I will generally write up a variant monster I'm using and make sure I have it documented properly. So but this is the chart you would use to determine XP. But maybe I'm building off of an existing monster, and I'm going to try to use my best judgment as to what I think is relevant regarding the XP value for a creature I've made. Now, for example, like a creature I've run into from, I think, Dungeon Dragon Magazine was like special skeletons that are enchanted in different ways so that they're not just skeletons. Like one that stands out in my mind is that they had basically gems in the eye sockets, and the eye sockets where those gems were enchanted with fireball spell, which is a lot. And certainly is more than just one asterisk on a 1 hit die creature. But I forget what the article in Dragon Magazine said about the actual XP for such creatures. It's been more than a moment. But I do remember reading about those and being, well, that's neat in my young self. That's going to be it for this part of our reading. Next time, I will be getting into procedures and rules. Thank you very much for you taking the time to listen to me today and to join me in the book. I hope that you're interested in this material, or that you find my voice relaxing. I know some people have said that before. But I know you have a lot of options of what you can do with your time, and I really appreciate you coming and listening to me talk about something I'm passionate about. And I hope you have a great day. Goodbye.